From Relay FM, this is Connected, episode 149. Today's show is brought to you by Mack Weldon Hover and Igloo. My name is Mike Hurley, and we've got the band back together because Stephen Hackett is here. Hello, Stephen Hackett.
Hello, Michael Hurley.
How are you?
I'm good. It's the 4th of July. It's raining outside. We're here together.
Is this a haiku? It sounds like a haiku.
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't count the syllables, but I'm a little disappointed that I haven't gotten any gifts for 4th of July yet from you. What about Federico? Did you get me anything?
No. And this reminds me of a joke on The Big Bang Theory when, like, someone convinced Rajesh that on the 4th of July, people from another country are supposed to give Americans gifts. And so for 10 years, he gave his friends gifts on the 4th of July to celebrate America.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. That's not a thing. I don't think you're supposed to give your American friends gifts on the 4th of July.
No.
So I don't have anything for you. I'm sorry.
I'm assuming that the postal service is closed on the 4th of July, right?
I would think so.
That's why you haven't got your gift from me. It's in the mail, but they're not delivering it today.
Interesting.
So tomorrow is going to be a great day for you.
That's a real promise that I feel like you're going to break.
Who knows? Who knows? Amazon.com.
Yeah, same day delivery. So we had some people write in and ask about the prompt curse. Y'all mentioned this, I think, on last week's episode about the iPad and iOS 11 and exploding. We should explain what it is because we have a lot of listeners who were not around during the prompt days. We had a show before this called The Prompt. The archives are on the Relay website. You can go dig through and find them. You find the one about the iPhone keynote, I think it's episode 30, is probably by far the best one. But the prompt curse happened because we used to cover photo services on the show a lot back when they were kind of a thing before iCloud Photo Library and Google Photos took everything over. So we'd cover companies like Everpix and what were some of the others? I don't even remember.
I don't know.
But they're all gone because we spoke about them. So we would talk about a photo service and the next week they would have a Medium post apologizing that they were going out of business and all your photos were gone. Mm-hmm. This led to a website that'll be in the show notes, prompt.photos, which is, I haven't seen this in a couple of years, and it is amazing. So the prompt curse, we talk about a service or an app, and then the service or app goes out of business. It has happened to things other than photo services, but it is a thing that happened. It is a thing that continues to happen. We have this, I don't want to call it a gift. I don't know what to call it. We have this power.
It's a curse that's in the name.
Yeah.
We have a very specific set of skills.
That's right.
Which is to find services and to kill them.
Yeah.
This is what we do.
So if you have an app or a service that you would like sunsetted, get in touch and we will talk about it on the air.
Talk about it and kill it.
I'm not even sure Medium used to be a thing when we were doing the prompt and these companies would shut down. Back in the day, it was so difficult to announce that your company was laying off people and shutting down. It was a real struggle, and then Medium came along and sort of provided this new niche, these companies that need to announce that they've been acquired, and sort of Medium kind of revolutionized that space of shutdown announcements. It's really notable, in hindsight.
This leads to a paradox. Undoubtedly, Medium will go out of business, probably sooner rather than later.
They are heading that way.
They're doomed. Where does Medium announce that they are going out of business?
My money is on the Medium programmers leaving some ASCII code in the source code of the webpage. Like, you can inspect the webpage and you will see the announcement into the HTML, that kind of thing. Sort of like a meta shutdown announcement. Yeah.
Or they could go old school and put it on Tumblr or LiveJournal. There's lots of options.
I would say a self-hosted Jekyll install with a Dropbox folder on a GitHub.
Yeah. All of Medium just redirects to a GIST, and it's just like, oh, sorry, we ran out of money. VCs have no place to apologize now. It's going to be sad. So, Mike, have you installed the iOS 11 beta yet?
Yep. I gave up.
All right. That didn't take long.
I was setting myself up for a summer full of jokes. It's over in one week.
It was just, I really wanted to do it, and then
Can't wait to do it.
we had to record Upgrade early, and there wasn't any news. so the only thing that we could think to talk about was iOS 11, and I didn't want another episode where I was just asking people questions, so I installed it.
You're asking yourself questions?
Well, it's just me and Jason were just talking about some of our experiences. Mine were very early because I only did it that morning, so I'd only used it for a couple of hours. But it was just the excuse that I needed, right? Because I really wanted to do it. I kept backing up my iPad. I just kept doing it. I would back up my iPad and then I would chicken out. I did this for 4 days. I kept I back it up and I was like, no, I can't do it. And I back it up and I can't do it. So I'm using it and I really like it. There are some things that are horrifically broken, but that was expected, right? Test flight is just kaput for me, which I know is things happening to some, not happening to others. Some third-party apps are working but missing key features. I currently cannot export anything out of Dropbox. I have to use other apps to get things out of Dropbox. There's just stuff. But I will say that for me, the new multitasking interface, I'm absolutely in love with it. I already feel so much more productive. It takes getting used to because you have to adapt your workflows. But I feel like I have so much more control over the apps. I did this one thing today where I had two apps open side by side, right? And I was like, it'd be really so much easier if I could just move this one to the left. And I was like, I wonder if I can do that. And yes, you can. You can swap the apps around now. And I nearly squealed with excitement. And then I was like, I need a calculator up. And I'd usually just open another app. But no, I can bring up pCalc in the little slide over window. And there are some things that are different, Command Tab, whilst also being pretty broken right now, doesn't do what it used to do, where it would just switch out one app. But I'm getting really quick at just flicking up the dot, bringing out the app, and I also feel like I just have way more control about where apps are going to go. I can open them in the specific place that I want them to be, rather than opening and then readjusting everything around it. I know a lot of people are struggling right now and think it's complicated and coming from their previous workflow, but I think we're just holding on to what is fundamentally a broken way of doing things with the iOS 9 version of multitasking. This is vastly superior in, I think, almost every single way. I love it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have to agree with you, especially now that I'm using a bunch of third-party apps that have drag and drop support. Putting together the various bits from my review and just using this stuff, the slide over with 3 apps at the same time, and drag and drop, and some of these other changes are really just so impressive coming from iOS 10. I'm saving so many steps that I would have, otherwise I would have used workarounds and workflows. And now what I'm noticing is I'm using way fewer workflows than I used to do. And also I'm copying stuff to the clipboard way less, because you don't need to use the clipboard anymore just to move data back and forth between different apps. You can just hold it and move. And I know that this is a discussion that we'll probably have later on. It takes, you need to use multiple fingers, sometimes multiple hands, and it can feel like a whole circus going on, you need to be a contortionist and perform these gestures, but they do work. And there's a kind of geeky pleasure of being able to have these gestures and this multi-touch enabled drag and drop. It feels fun, and that's hard to explain.
I feel like I'm really in control. I feel like I have so much more control of what's going on than I did before, because I don't know, I feel like I'm able to bend it all to my will a little bit, but more than I used to, rather than me working around all of those things. It's much nicer. I will say I'm not using drag and drop, right, because most of the apps that I'm using don't support it. So I'm looking forward to that additional world of drag and drop as things move along throughout the year. I will say, just to follow up on last week, I don't want to get into this again because it makes me sad, but the notifications and widgets cover sheet thing is as much as a disaster as Federico outlined.
That's literally the next thing in follow-up. But yeah, so I'm running it too. I put it on my 10.5-inch iPad on Friday, and I very quickly realized that my entire iPad home screen was wrong, because apps in the dock are blessed in a way that apps not in the dock aren't. Kind of like watchOS, actually, that those things in the dock are easier to get to and can do more things. And so I basically collapsed my home screen into the dock and sort of promoted stuff that had been in folders or on the second screen up to the home screen. So nothing is where it used to be. But like the two of you, I do feel like I'm in more control, and I'm still sort of learning how everything works. Like sometimes I'll try something and it doesn't work the way I expect it to, and some of the gestures are I think a little less than ideal. Like if you have an app, for instance, that uses sliding panes like Slack, and you have it in the third popover window, and you want to push it back off the screen, and if you don't get it just right, you're just moving the interface around inside of Slack instead of moving Slack itself, because there's kind of a very thin strip you need to hit.
I think a lot of developers still need to approach that, right? Like I feel like people haven't done that yet, right? Like worked out like how do I make sure I give people enough space to be able to move the UI around, right?
Yeah, but all in all, it's impressive, and I think that iOS 11 is going to be awesome. So, way to go, iOS 11 team. But you said you didn't want to get into cover sheet, and that's too bad, because that is the next thing in follow-up. We have a long tweet thread. We'll link to the first one in the show notes about kind of following up on Mike on what you said about, maybe is there something about this design that is giving us hints or make more sense with the next iPhone. So Apple has done this in the past, right, where they'll put things in iOS that don't quite make full sense until you see the new hardware. And I think that's what this tweet thread is getting to. So Federico, do you want to take this?
So the idea here is that if we consider a feature iPhone without a home button, and with a more prominent use of 3D touch, the argument from this person goes, the cover sheet design makes sense because to open the phone, to unlock the phone, you tap on a notification. So all you need to do is you 3D touch on a notification, you unlock the phone, and you also, you see what that notification is all about. And it makes sense if we follow this idea to merge the sort of the notifications and the lock screen, because you pick up the phone, you look at what's new, you tap it on a notification, and you authenticate somehow, whether that's TouchID or, maybe by looking at the phone, which we're going to talk about in a few minutes. So the idea is you remove confusion by merging these two areas of iOS, and you have a list of notifications, you tap it, and you go into the phone, which is unlocked, and it lets you view the notification. I sort of understand the idea behind this, to merge everything, to make a single place where you can view all of your messages and alerts from apps, and to also unlock the phone the moment that you open a notification. But the problem that I have with this idea is it kind of falls apart if you have no notifications. And at that point, what is left to do on the lock screen? You authenticate and you're back into the phone. So we're not really merging these two aspects. Because then again, if you unlock the phone and then you swipe down and then you view no notifications, then you need to swipe up again. And as I said last week, my main problem is this sort of this seesaw approach of I need to swipe down and then I need to swipe up even more carefully until I feel this taptic feedback from the iPhone that tells me you're scrolling up to view your older notifications. Whereas before, if I swipe down, I knew I could just keep scrolling without a release mechanism to load my previous notifications. And so while I understand the current design of we want to make it easier for people because they associate the lock screen with notifications, therefore when you swipe down, you view notifications, so you view the lock screen, it's the interaction that bothers me. It's the fact that you need to release very intentionally to load the older notifications, and also the complete absence of gestures to triage individual notifications, which is basically impossible now because you need to carefully tap on a notification, which a lot of people have problems. For example, Sylvia cannot long press on her iPhone. I don't know if it's because she's a woman. She has obviously, she has longer fingernails. She's a different kind of user, so she cannot use 3D touch properly. She cannot even long press properly on the screen because her touches are often not recognized. And so you're making it more difficult to expand a single notification, whereas it was much easier to just swipe across the screen and do one thing at a time with individual notifications. It's just, I understand the design, I understand the idea, it's the implementation that could be so much better. And again, the release mechanism of dividing the non-seen notifications versus the older ones, and you need to swipe up and you feel the tap and you need to load them. It's very intentional and it really slows me down. And I would like to see in beta 3 or in beta 4, whatever, like a refinement of this idea, because it can go somewhere, but not with the current design, in my opinion.
I think that knowing everything that we know, and we're going to get into these iPhone rumors next, because I think we just have to follow with this. I see that there is some thought with this that makes sense to me. Like, if looking at your phone now unlocks your phone, then all you need to do is just interact with it in a way, right? So like just swiping up from the bottom, or I expect there to be like some virtual button on the home screen that maybe you would just tap and it would take you there, right? Like it just opens it up or something, right? Because there's going to be all this new screen replay or something. But I could see a world in which this makes sense if TouchID is not needed anymore. I agree with you, like some of the implementation's wonky and that can get better. But it really does feel to me like that there's something in this which is lining up with the rest of the rumors that we've heard about the iPhone, considering how little sense this currently makes with what we're currently using, that it feels to me that there just has to be something there.
I mean, I don't know what hardware would dictate the us losing the ability to dismiss a single notification.
Yo, that's broken, but I'm not talking about that. Like, I'm talking about the idea of merging all of this stuff together as a concept. Like I said, the implementation still leaves a lot to be desired, like the fine details. But the overall idea of why you would do this, I think, lends to that.
Yeah. I think that's it for follow-up.
All right,
We've done it.
Yeah, I want to just talk about this iPhone stuff now because we're moving into it already. Today's show is brought to you by Mack Weldon, the most comfortable underwear, socks, shirts, undershirts, hoodies, and sweatpants that you will ever wear are made by this company because they believe that by pairing premium fabrics with meticulous attention to detail and giving you a simple shopping experience to get them home, Mack Weldon can deliver to you a new level of daily comfort straight to your door. They believe, and I agree, that Mack Weldon is better than anything else that you have. It's better than whatever you're wearing right now. They make undershirts that stay tucked, socks that stay up, and waistbands that do not roll. Everything is made with premium cotton blended with natural fibers. And I love that their website is built to get you in and out as quickly as possible. They don't want to waste your time. They want to do their best to get you what you need and get you on your way. Mack Weldon are so confident in the quality of their products that they have a no questions asked return policy. They want to make sure that you're super comfortable in what you wear. If for any reason you don't like your first pair, just keep them and they'll refund you, no questions asked. I love my Mack Weldon clothing, and I desperately need more of it, and I'm going to take care of that very soon as I'm making another trip to the US. So, Stephen, look out for a package. That won't be your gift, but it might be some new underwear for me. Not only do Mack Weldon's underwear, socks, and shirts look good, they perform well too. They're good for working out, going to work, traveling, or for everyday life. Listeners of this show can get 20% off at MackWeldon.com by using the code CONNECTED. Thank you so much to Mack Weldon for their support of this show and Relay FM. I feel like we've gone around this tree quite a few times, but we're back to talk about TouchID again on the potential next iPhone, which I think for the case of this discussion, we'll just refer to as the iPhone Pro. Are we all happy to refer to this phone as the iPhone Pro for this discussion?
All right. Yeah.
Sure.
Okay.
Just so we can differentiate it in some way. So our good old friend at KGI Securities, Ming-Chi Kuo, has issued a predictions report for the iPhone Pro. And these are some of the things that Ming-Chi Kuo mentions. All right. So I'll read these through and then we'll jump into the TouchID one because it's probably the more interesting of all of this. So Ming-Chi Kuo says that the next iPhone will feature the biggest screen-to-body ratio of any phone on the market, therefore having the thinnest bezels. The screen will be OLED, the home button will be virtual, the front camera will include 3D depth sensing technology that will help with face scanning because Ming-Chi Kuo says that the next iPhone, the iPhone Pro, will have no Touch ID sensor of any kind. So this is a direct quote. We predict the OLED model won't support fingerprint recognition. Reasons being, 1. The full-screen design doesn't work with existing capacitive fingerprint recognition, and 2. The scan-through ability of the under-display fingerprint solution still has technical challenges. So Ming-Chi Kuo is saying that Apple has not been able to, or they believe, that KGI believes that Apple has not been able to embed a Touch ID sensor into the screen of the phone. So, instead of putting it anywhere else on the device, they are getting rid of Touch ID in favor of face scanning, 3D depth sensing face scanning, which they've implemented for this phone, and that it would be good enough. So, there's a few questions about this, and there's also a Bloomberg report, which we'll get to in a moment, which I think addresses some of these questions, but I want to talk through them as a group. So first off, would Apple remove Touch ID? So removing Touch ID could potentially cut support for Apple Pay, right? If there's no authentication method. So let's just assume that there's no Touch ID. Apple's not going to just get rid of this method, right? There's going to be some kind of authentication, because otherwise, where does Touch ID go? Where does Apple Pay go, right? Like, they're not going to remove that.
Just a blood sample.
You think you just prick your finger on the phone every single time you buy something. It's a real Pavlovian response to buying new things.
I don't see them removing it unless there's something equally secure and easy to use. And we're going to get into some things that could do that potentially. But they're not going. I don't see them getting rid of it without a really strong case to replace it with something else. And I can hear you now, Stephen, the headphone jack. They removed the headphone jack, and I still don't think they've given enough of a reason why. But that's a different type of feature.
I will say on that note, though, they did remove it, but they gave me AirPods, and AirPods are amazing. And I know they could have given me AirPods anyway. I know they could have done it anyway, but there is a better thing.
I think that sidesteps the actual argument of Touch ID, like you said, is key to not only Apple Pay, but like device security and like a headphone jack. Like, I was going to write off that complaint because headphone jack is like, it's a kind of a pain to live without it, but it's not device security. It's not payment security. And can they go to all their banking partners and deal with this in a way that like keeps everybody happy, or Touch ID like the linchpin in all of it? I don't know if any of us on the outside know how important Touch ID is to some of those deals, but Apple's not going to do something that is less secure, right? Like that goes against everything they've done like the last 5 years, or if not longer, with this phone. So I don't buy this unless the replacement is equally good to use and equally as secure.
All right, I have many, many thoughts here.
Here we go. Settle in, everyone.
Let me go with an opening statement, which is the idea of just getting rid of Touch ID because you cannot figure out a way to make it work with the iPhone Pro is the equivalent of getting a new car when you blow a tire. Like, we couldn't get that to work, so I figured we might as well get rid of it.
It is a real scorched earth situation, right? We couldn't work it out, so whatever.
Yeah, exactly. So that said, we can all agree on the fact that there's no way that Apple is going back to a world where it's just a passcode. There has to be a second, possibly based on biometric authentication method of providing an extra layer of encryption and security on the iPhone. So far, that has been Touch ID, and Touch ID powers a lot of services and features on the iPhone, from encrypting, backups, and the lock screen, authentication with the App Store, Apple Pay, the API for developers. There's a whole API to use Touch ID in third-party apps, and Touch ID is really everywhere. And the thing that sells Touch ID, it's not that it's a fingerprint. Yes, it's a fingerprint reader, but it's the fact that it's so fast, accessible, and easy to use. And also the fact that you don't have to look at your phone while you authenticate with Touch ID. Anyone who's ever taken the tube in London, Mike, you know this. Or you're grocery shopping and you're in a hurry. You just place your finger on the home button and you feel the tap and you hear the sound effect and you're done. You know that you've authenticated. It doesn't get in the way, and it's an unassuming interaction. It's not flashy. And we're at the point where, most people are getting used to Apple Pay. Most people are getting used to Touch ID. It's a natural way of authenticating. So if Apple wants to, in my mind, if Apple wants to provide an alternative to Touch ID, it has to be as quick and easy to use and accessible, because remember, one of the benefits of Touch ID is that it's in a fixed position on the device. Even if you have, motor impairments or visual impairments, you can just feel Touch ID and you can use it. Anyone can use it, unless you don't have fingers or you've burned off your fingerprints, but that's another problem. So a faster solution to Touch ID, let's assume that it's face recognition. The problem with face recognition is not that most implementations so far have sucked, which is, we can all agree on that. They're not perfect, they're not great. And it wouldn't surprise me if Apple comes out with a much better, faster, more powerful solution, and we're all surprised. Well, Apple did it again. They reinvented face recognition. I could see that, actually. And I could see how in iOS 11, with the machine learning stuff, if you look at the Vision APIs, Apple has much improved the system that they provide to third-party developers. The system can recognize faces that are partially occluded, people with sunglasses, with hats, profiles. The API itself is more powerful. So you can only imagine, if the API is even more powerful, imagine the stuff that Apple keeps to themselves. So it's totally possible that Apple can pull this off, especially with the 3D mapping, stuff with the depth perception. My problem is in the physical implementation of face recognition. So there's also a report from Gurman on Bloomberg, and he says that Apple has figured out a way to make this work even when an iPhone is sitting flat on a table. So I have to assume even if you place your iPhone next to a scanner, next to a point of sale system, somehow the camera is going to look right back at you and authenticate you. And I struggle to imagine how that could be possible, unless there's a multi-camera array along the top edge and the bottom edge of the phone. I struggle to imagine a way to make this work without holding up an iPhone and basically taking a selfie. And if we reach that point where we imagine an iPhone Pro and a bunch of people in the London Tube or at my local supermarket, and everyone before authenticating has to basically take a selfie, even if it takes a second, it's not, the operation itself can take even less than a second. It's the gesture of pulling out your phone, looking at your face, basically taking a selfie. Now everybody's looking at you, and you end up with a whole system that takes at least 3 seconds, and it's much slower than Touch ID. And this is where I come down on this rumor right now. It's hard for me to imagine a system that is faster than Touch ID. Not more secure, because I can believe that Apple maybe has a solution that, it can identify 2D pictures, so it won't authenticate you. It can identify, even the finest details of your skin and your eyebrows and your retina, whatever. I totally believe that it's gonna be possible somehow. But it's the different physical behavior of using a face scanner, and it's the accessibility of that. What happens in low light conditions? And there's a few people that says, well, Apple is going to use an IR scanner, so it can work even if it's dark. All right, sure. What happens if I'm a blind person and I cannot look at the screen? I don't know if I'm looking straight at my face or if I'm holding the iPhone at a weird angle and it doesn't authenticate me. Whereas with Touch ID before, I could just feel the button and place my finger. It's such a different way of authenticating, and it's such a different way of holding the iPhone and, saying it's me, that combining that with the even higher emphasis on Apple Pay in iOS 11 from, Touch ID with Apple Pay in iMessage, the App Store dialog when you purchase apps in iOS 11, it looks like an Apple Pay sheet and there's a fingerprint icon right front and center on that dialog. It's so strange to me that Apple would get rid of Touch ID right now because they cannot figure out how to make it work with the iPhone Pro, and that the solution to that is a face scanner. I just don't know what to think, honestly.
Mark Gurman follows up with a report. Some quotes from Mark Gurman's report. Apple is testing an improved security system that allows users to log in, authenticate payments, and launch secure apps by scanning their face, according to people familiar with the product. It can scan a user's face and unlock the iPhone within a few hundred milliseconds, the person said. It is designed to work even if the device is laying flat on a table rather than just close up to the face. However, the intent is for it to replace the Touch ID fingerprint scanner. In testing, the Face Unlock feature takes in more data points than a fingerprint scan, making it more secure than the Touch ID system, the person said. The feature is still being tested and may not appear with the new device. That last line, I put it in there. I think that this is one of those things that Bloomberg makes Gurman put in, personally. I think that they're just like, you got to cover yourself.
The safety net.
Yeah. And I think that they make him put weird stuff like that in there, as well as as the person said. So I'm just gonna do this. Remember, year of optimism and all that I'm going for. It's my plan here. So I remember that fingerprint scanners were terrible, and that the idea of Apple putting a fingerprint scanner into the iPhone seemed like a stupid one because fingerprint scanners were terrible. Right, like every fingerprint scanner I'd ever used on like a ThinkPad just didn't work, right? Like they just flat out didn't work. Touch ID works; it's flawless, effectively, right? With how successful it is. So let's assume that what Gurman's saying is true, right? That all of this stuff is correct. This sounds fine to me. This sounds good. Like speed. Okay, so let's just take the argument about speed. I understand that as a thing about why speed in these situations is good, but if we don't, let's think like that. Let's say it takes a little bit longer than Touch ID. What are the other benefits, right? Like speed isn't the only thing here, and there may be something that's nicer. There may be something that's just cooler about it, right? That all you do is just pick up your phone. The action that we all have for picking up the phone, the raise to wake. As soon as we do that now, our phone's unlocked. Like we don't need to worry about tapping anything or clicking anything. We don't need to have a home button anymore. So not having a home button means that our screens are even bigger than before. Right, so that is a big benefit that we get. Maybe we don't need buttons at all on the next phone. It's just this beautiful thing because it's all about this using this face detection technology. Like in trying to have faith in this, I can maybe see that there could be some very interesting stuff in here, and like stuff about like which I agree with. How do you do buying of stuff when you're already looking at the device? Like, there is an implementation detail in there that's not for us to decide, but if we assume that they work it out in an as nice a way as they've worked out putting my thumb on the screen, then it'll be fine. Let's say, for example, it's kind of playful, blink, or like like there could be something in it that is interesting. Maybe you pick your own facial expression that helps you buy stuff.
Password.
Yeah,
show an emotion.
And so I think, like, I agree that, like, the pure idea of Touch ID going away is bonkers. But if you think it just becomes Face ID and we use our faces instead of our fingerprint scanners and we get all of the functionality we had before and just leave it up to them to work out the details, the benefits that we could potentially get just from a device perspective could be great. And I agree with you, Federico, that like on paper it maybe sounds harder for accessibility, but I also have faith that Apple's got that part covered because that's something that they care about so much, right? Like I will assume that whatever they do, it will not become harder for people that have accessibility issues to use. It may expose some new ones, but everything does, right? Like everything they add may solve something for some people, make it harder for others. But I'm sure that they will try their utmost to make sure that this feature includes as many people as possible and then make an epic amount of options to allow for people that now are struggling to be able to access their device in a different way, right? Like, I'm confident that they will find ways to tackle that part because maybe more than any other technology company, any mainstream technology company, Apple cares about this stuff more than anybody else, right?
I'm really torn on this, and I totally understand your point, and I'm gonna play devil's advocate, and let's think that it's happening and it's real. So I think you're totally right when you say even if it's slightly slower, not because the sensor takes milliseconds, but because there's humans holding phones, and humans don't just take milliseconds to operate. But even if it's slower and it takes 2-3 seconds, if it's more secure, then I totally buy the argument. Apple could say it's they won't say it's slower, but, it's times more secure and unique than Touch ID. So we believe this is the right technology to use going forward. And that I could buy. And I could also say, there could be an elegant way to make this work for the thousands of apps that already implement TouchID, and maybe the same API used for a TouchID authentication could automatically fall back onto Face ID when you're using an iPhone 8. So right at launch, 1Password without doing any work, for example, could support Face ID with the same Touch ID dialog.
It's just the same call. Like, it's just the same API call, and Apple just throws up the new UI that they've built.
I think so.
Like, that's how that will work.
So that could work. I think part of me, the problem that I have right now is that I'm feeling the same way that older people felt about the headphone jack going away, because Touch ID is a feature of our generation, and to think about it going away already, it makes me feel uneasy right now, and it makes me come up with all kinds of questions and reasons why it would be a bad idea. But there's also the argument that Touch ID doesn't work for everyone. If you have Face ID, it doesn't matter if you're sweaty or you just took a shower, because the camera doesn't touch your skin. You're just looking at your face, so you can always authenticate, whereas Touch ID has that kind of problems. And Face ID would work even if you're wearing gloves, or hats or glasses. Once again, because it doesn't matter whether your skin is in direct contact with the sensor. So I could see all the arguments for that. It's just that kind of feature that I was there when it launched, and it's become so entrenched in the way that we use iOS that it makes me skeptical to think of a replacement, not even 4-5 years after the first Touch ID sensor. Again, I should say, if, and that's a big if, it's really safer and more secure than Touch ID. If this Face ID can provide more unique data points about whether it's really me. And by the way, the argument that, what happens if you change your hairstyle? That's really not relevant, because right now I'm looking at my Photos app, and the Photos app with no training can recognize my face when I was, 16, when I was bald because I was doing chemo, and when I had a beard, when I didn't have a beard. So it doesn't really matter.
I think the things that it's looking for, like, it's not looking for, is your hair spiky, right? Like, it's looking for, like, the distance between your eyes, Yeah. I can tell you myself it doesn't really matter, because I've had all kinds of hairstyles. So that's not a problem. My problem is what happens in busy situations where there's a lot of people behind you. So that's, and I could think about that and maybe say, well, that's where the 3D stuff comes in, because you have a 3D map, so you can block out people in the background, for example, people waiting in line at the cash register or people waiting in line in the tube, and you could identify you. Or it could use some kind of proximity with the Apple Watch. I don't know, but I'm sure that Apple can find a way to say there's 50 people here, but the person that is trying to authenticate with Face ID is this user, X centimeters away from the camera. So that I could totally believe. My main question is, how does it work in the physical space? What am I supposed to do to make this work? Because Touch ID is a known quantity. I just have to pick up my phone. I don't have to look at it. I place my finger and it works. Face ID will require some kind of selfie-like authentication process, which I'm not sure about, but I guess we'll see what happens. I'm trying to be optimistic, but it's my second nature to find all the possible problems and consequences and how things could go badly. Here's the thing, right? Like, I've been thinking about this in the idea of Fraser Spear's fantastic article that's been shared a few times this week, where, like, he argues, like, he makes, like, does a review of a MacBook Pro as an iPad user, like, flips it on its head. Like, can the MacBook Pro replace your iPad, right? Like, he did this, it was like in 2015, but it's still relevant now because for some reason this has become a problem again. And let's imagine that we already have face detection and we're going to move to fingerprint detection, right? And it's like, oh, I have to put, like, specific fingers on my phone? Like, all I have to do right now is pick it up and it unlocks. What if my girlfriend wants to use my phone? She now has to, like, she has to pass it to me and I have to unlock it when she could just point it at my face and unlock it. Like, that's so much easier, right? Like, there are just these arguments that I can imagine if this thing is great about, like, why it could be better. And then I think it's fun to turn it on its head. Like, I'm optimistic about this because I think that in removing the home button completely and therefore Touch ID going with it, there are a lot of advancements in the hardware that we could get. And then it's up to Apple to make Face ID better than anything that's come before it and better than Touch ID. And I believe that they would not remove Touch ID from the next phone, the phone that's going to be the most expensive, most premium iPhone that's ever made, if it's worse. I just can't see that being a thing, because there's no way they got to a point where they were like, oh, this won't work. Oh no, we have nothing. We have no plan B. Like, there was always a plan B. Then, like, that's silly to me. And my hope is that Face ID was plan A, Touch ID was plan B, and they just couldn't get it to work. So we'll see.
You know, I'm calling it now. There's going to be people, if Face ID happens, there's going to be people who 3D print heads, like to like models to test whether it works or not. And I bet that whatever system Apple comes up with, it's gonna have some clever workarounds for that. Like it detects like those minimal movements of your eyes or of your skin, like sub-skin elements even, that it can recognize human versus like a mannequin holding an iPhone. So that's gonna be super fascinating if it happens.
Yeah, it does potentially open up an opportunity on the Mac as well. If Touch ID is going to be married to the touch bar on the Mac and the touch bar is dead in the water or difficult to implement in an external Bluetooth keyboard, I would imagine that they could put whatever this face sensing deal is, and we haven't really gotten into that. Surely it's more than just the camera, but that could come to the Mac and be really interesting if Touch ID is indeed getting replaced with some sort of facial thing, right? That you could add that to an iMac and it doesn't matter what keyboard you have.
Because every Mac already has a camera on the front of it anyway, right?
Right. So, and I truly believe that this would be something more than just the camera, that it's using IR or something else. But you have, like, you already have some infrastructure there. You could put the secure enclave in there somewhere, and you could, every Mac has a bezel around the screen, and there's already a camera up there. Just put something else up there too. So if this is the case, that Touch ID is going to be kind of pushed aside for some sort of facial thing, I would be very interested to see where that expands in the future to other products besides just the iPhone.
All right. This episode is also brought to you by our friends over at Hover. When you have a great idea for your next blog or your next project that you've been working on, you need to get a website. And when you get a website, you need to have a great domain name. Because, look, you want it to be memorable. Maybe you want to set up an email address with it as well, right? Hover offer that, by the way. You want to have a great email address. Like, there is a bunch of different reasons to get a great domain, and finding that perfect domain is so easy with Hover. They have over 400 domain extensions that you can end your domain with, all of the classics that you're used to and all the crazy ones as well. And once you get your domain, you can use it to get an on-brand or maybe just a more professional email address. Like, it is nice to have an email address that has a personalized domain rather than like Hotmail or something. And all of this stuff can be super easy to set up with Hover, and any email address that you create will work with whatever email programs you're already using, and they'll be able to help you with that because they have fantastic features like their support team, right? Their support team is always there for you. You can give them a call. They have an actual person that's going to pick up the phone. They'll answer whatever questions you might have. There are no annoying phone trees or being transferred to another department for you to deal with. They also have Hover Connect, which lets you set up your domain in just a few clicks with most popular website builders. There's no more digging through help articles to figure out how to get those MX records to work. Find the perfect domain for your next idea. Go to hover.com/connected and you'll get 10% off your first purchase. That is hover.com/connected to find out more and get 10% off your first purchase at hover.com. Thank you so much to Hover for their support. Hover, domain names for your ideas. Thank you so much to Hover for supporting this show and Relay FM. Stephen, we were talking about the reviews of the Echo show last week, and since that episode, yours was received. You now have an Echo show at home, and I was saying on the episode that I'm reserving most of my judgment until I hear what you have to say. So what's going on?
Wow, that's a real vote of confidence.
I believe in you.
So I'm going to categorize my comments in sort of three buckets: hardware, software, and potential. So no doubt people have seen photos of this thing. It is not the prettiest thing in my household, unfortunately. The screen is bright. I actually had a video call on it with Jason Snell, and we both sort of commented like how deep the screen looks recessed, like it's not laminated to the cover like you're used to on an iPad or an iPhone. But it's really bright. It's really clear. The speakers are incredible, way better than the regular Echo. Definitely better than the Dot. I mean, I've got a Dot here on my desk, and the speaker is just, it's fine for the voice, but that's about it. Interestingly, I noticed during the boot up sequence is a little flash of the Intel Inside logo, which I did not anticipate. I figured these things would have some sort of ARM processor in them.
How peculiar to see that.
I don't know what's in there. I tried to do some digging, and there's not a lot of information on the web about what Intel processors in here. You know, maybe that's where all the Xeons went that Apple didn't use. But
does it have a Pentium 3 sticker also?
That'd be awesome. That'd be incredible. So it's got Intel inside. The microphone array and everything seems to work just as well as the regular Echo. It is more directional in a way. You know, the Echo and the Dot being cylinders, the sound comes out of them the same in every direction. So you could put it kind of anywhere in the room. The speakers on the show fire forward, which makes sense because you have a screen, right? You're not going to point the screen at the wall. But it's something to be aware of as you set this thing up, that you may need to turn it or have it slightly different if you're just dropping in where a regular Echo was. And one thing that Amazon's done that I think is incredible, and I think like Microsoft did this with the Xbox and now the Xbox One X, the power plug is the same. And it's in the same place. And so you can unplug your Echo and plug your Echo Show in with the same power brick and everything. You don't have to change anything out. So if it's behind, stuff on the kitchen counter or in an entertainment center somewhere, you're not digging around, you can just unplug it and plug the same little barrel connector in, which I love those little details that hardware makers do, and Amazon gets a lot of that stuff right, honestly. So the hardware is not much to look at, but what is there is nice. It does look kind of like a little old TV set, but got a little more bulk than I had anticipated. Maybe we'll find it for the show notes. I put a picture on Instagram of it and the Molar Mac, which is like the super ugly Mac Apple made in the 90s, and they kind of look the same from a certain angle. And so that's not great, but it is what it is, I guess. The touchscreen itself, kind of moving from hardware to software, enables a lot of nice stuff. And where I was immediately impressed with it, this is so much better than the regular Echo experience, was connecting to Wi-Fi. So Amazon does have this thing, if you have an account set up with an Echo, that you can have Amazon hold on to your wireless password. I don't have that enabled on my account for hopefully obvious reasons. So I had to type in my Wi-Fi password, and instead of like getting the Echo app out, I actually pulled my phone out while the thing was booting up, thinking I'm going to need the phone to configure this, and you don't, because it has a screen. You can just type in your Wi-Fi password. It was kind of great if you're used to the normal Echo interface. One of the first things I tried, of course, was the video calling. There's no interface to this, and so I just said, friend in a tube, video call Jason Snell, and it did it. Like, I just tried the first thing that came to mind, and it worked. And I was impressed that it understood that I got the vocabulary right by basically guessing. The call was fine. It did freeze at first, but then it was okay. And I'm willing to, this was very early, we got ours on the first or second day they were out. I haven't had that problem on subsequent calls, so maybe it was just a hiccup. But Jason Snell had lifted his arms in the air, and then he was frozen that way for a couple minutes, which was pretty funny.
Wish you got a picture of that.
It was pretty. I should have. He was just standing with his arms raised high in victory. But the call quality and stuff is fine. It's what you expect from FaceTime or Skype on a good day. The software benefits from all the work Amazon does in the background, so it knew who Jason Snell was because I had already given them all my contacts. Sorry.
Oh man.
Part of the deal. Yeah. If Amazon didn't know your email address, real sorry, but it is what it is. But it knew who he was because he already had access to that. Likewise, I didn't have to go in and set up Spotify because my Echo system already knows about my Spotify account. So I could just tell it, friend in a tube, play polka music, and it knew what to do because it was already hooked up.
Polka, polka, polka.
That's right. Amazon does a really good job with that stuff. Kind of how Apple does with iCloud. If you sign to iCloud in your account, certain things take place. It's the same with all this stuff. But unfortunately, it's not all puppies and rainbows when it comes to the software on this thing. And I will preface my complaints by saying two things. A, I know it's early days, and Amazon generally does a pretty decent job at updating things, and there's some things on the Echo originally that they have resolved. Things on the Kindles have gotten better over time. So I understand that my complaints could be resolved with future software updates, and indeed I hope they are. Two, there is an inherent weirdness in reviewing something over such a short period of time. And Dan Morin actually was giving me a hard time about this, about trying to make a decision on this product so early because it is so different than the other Echo. I appreciate that thought, but I also disagree with it a little bit that there are some things that you're just going to know that if you like or not. And the Echo Show is one of those things for me.
Like the Logitech Slim Combo.
Huh?
Like the Logitech Slim Combo.
Exactly. It doesn't take long to realize that thing is a piece of garbage. So a couple things in the software that I really don't like. First, every screen has a hint. So if you are currently playing your polka music, it's got the album artwork, and it's like an iPod, right? It's got all your music information on it. But then there's a little line and it says, try, wake word, show me my photo albums. It's like, I don't need a hint when I'm listening to music to try something else. Also, LOL, no one uses Amazon Photo Service. But so it felt kind of like advertising in a way for a service that no one's using, but also explain to you what else your device can do. And almost every single screen on the Echo Show has this little bottom third of saying, hey, try this other voice command. And I appreciate the helpfulness that they're trying to surface new commands because there's no interface to this thing, right? I just had to say video call Jason Snell for it to work because there's no interface to go and do that thing. But the trade-off is I feel like I'm being annoyed to death by the Tips app on iOS 11, and I could not find a way to turn this off in settings, which is a bummer.
I wonder if it's something that goes away after a certain period of time.
It may, and I have not sat down and mapped out the frequency of it, so I don't know, to be honest with you. I would hope that it would trail off of, hey, once you've set X number of commands to this thing, then slowly fade these away. But for now, at least starting off, the first week or so of use, they're not there, or they're there all the time. Excuse me. The other big thing that bothers me about the Echo Show is it is very attention hungry. And what I mean by that, the Echo itself, and the Echo Dot, and Siri, and Bixby, I guess if you have a Samsung phone, the Google Assistant, all of these things are kind of in waiting. And what I mean by that is that they are there for you when you want them to do something or when you need something, but they're not reminding you of their presence. So the Echo, if I'm not talking to it, the LEDs are off. It's just sitting on my kitchen counter. And you may know what it is if you come into my house, or you may think it's a weird salt and pepper grinder or something. It's just an object sitting on the counter, right? Not necessarily the prettiest thing, but it's very inoffensive. If you're not using Siri, it's just locked away behind the home button or the wake word. Same with the Google Assistant. But the show is not that way. The show has a screen, and that screen is always on. Yeah. And you can fall back to a screensaver of just a clock. And if you put the thing in Do Not Disturb mode, it goes to the clock and stays there. But every time you walk by it, or if you're like me and it's in your office that's only 200 square feet, it detects your motion, and so the screen's always awake. And what it's doing is showing Amazon, I believe they're called home cards, and these cards kind of cycle through in a carousel, and I care about none of them. So you can tell it, hey, put my next calendar appointment in there if I use Google Calendar, put these things in here. But it's also a lot of news, a lot of entertainment stuff that honestly I just don't care about. I don't care, about, one was like some new like thing on Instagram that was trending, or what Kanye was doing for the 4th of July. Like, I just don't care, and I don't want that stuff shown, to me, right? Like, I don't want to see it, and there's no way to to turn that off. There's no way to tell it just go to the clock and stay there unless you put it in do not disturb. So it is trying to pull your attention into it when all of these other voice assistants are just kind of laying and waiting. Does that make sense? Like, does that framing make sense to you, Mike?
Yeah, and I don't like the sound of it. I don't know if I'd assumed that the screen was always on. Probably I did, but just thinking of that is not what I like about my Echo, in that, as you say, I like the idea of in waiting, right? That's a really good way of putting it. That these things are just like, they're like Jeeves, and Jeeves is never seen, right? Like, he's just, when you need him, he'll come and help you out. But like, if you don't need him, he's not going to be there, like holding up a big sign saying like, "Hey, would you like me to get the buggy, master?" I don't know why I'm doing this, but that's kind of where my mind went to. I don't like the idea of it just being this persistent screen that has stuff showing on it, when that stuff a lot of the time feels like it might be like advertisements to use it more, right? Like, come and do this with me. Like, I don't need you to do that. Like, I appreciate the ability at trying to teach someone how to use their device a little bit better, but do that in context. Like, so if I've asked you a question about photos, give me some other options for it, or let me tell you that I need help with something. I don't know, there's something about, like, as you say, like when you're doing one thing and it's trying to give you a tip about another piece of functionality that's completely unrelated, it feels a little bit redundant, and it needy in a way that I'm not keen on for a device like this. I don't need neediness from my voice assistant devices.
Yeah. Someone in the chat room asking what would I want to see on that home screen. The calendar stuff is nice, but I like the clock. I would like to have weather, which I think you can tell the weather to be there, but I would like that stuff to be more sort of ambient. Like, these tiles don't need to rotate around on a carousel. Like, every time the thing moves, it catches my eye. And I don't, my wife did not want that in the kitchen, which is why this thing is in the office. And I don't want it here in my office, catching my eye every time. Like, I have a digital clock in my office, and it shows the weather and like some stats, like Twitter followers and YouTube subscribers and stuff. Like, it was a Christmas gift. I really like it. It's on the other side of my office. I can't see it from my desk, because every time the thing moves, it catches my eye. And maybe I'm just a squirrel attracted to shiny things, but like, that is really distracting when I'm trying to write or trying to edit.
Mm-hmm.
And this thing is like, every time you walk by it, it's got something new to show you. And there may be a place for that in the kitchen, right? Like, having a screen that surfaces things. But I think my household, I'll speak for my wife as well, we have come to appreciate the Echo because it's not there unless you start the conversation. And that difference may seem subtle, but I think it's really profound, that something is always responsive as to something that is trying to initiate some sort of interaction.
Seems like you're not too hot on this in the overall. Like, I can't imagine you're going to be keeping this thing.
I'm not keeping it. I see. So the third part of the review is potential. If they solve those software issues, that's great. I can see a real potential of things like and it's been mocked a lot, and there's been a lot of like Apple commentators like really down on this feature of being able to like the drop in, right? So Mike, if I gave you permission, underline all of those words, then you can start a video call and I don't have to approve it. Like, you can just show up. You know what? If you don't want that, don't opt into it. It's not a hard thing. You don't have to write a blog post burning Amazon down. You don't opt into it. But there are times and relationships, I think, that would benefit from that. I think Amazon's did a pretty good job at outlining what those would be. But like, that stuff is promising. It sounds great. Having a screen is nice. Like, having a little news or having weather, like that sort of stuff is nice. But I think Amazon has a long way in going in understanding what customers like about the Echo products and how the Echo Show breaks a lot of those things, at least for users like me. And I think the Echo Show is salvageable, Like, I don't think it's a dead end product, but I think Amazon sort of missed the mark in understanding what people like about the service. And it's too pushy and it's too in your face. And if they can dial some of that back and the screen can be there when you want it, but not all the time, I think I at least would find it a much more attractive offering. But for now, I'd prefer my $200 back or whatever it was. So I'm returning it.
It really sounds to me like what I expected in that it adds a bunch of functionality, which is interesting. It's just not the stuff I want to do. And everything that I want to do with that device is already in the one I own. So I'm all good.
Yes. Yeah, Jason talked about he has some security cameras that the Echo Show can show him a live feed from the camera. Like, that sort of stuff is cool. Like, do things that you can't do on a regular Echo. But the other stuff, I think, is the water's just too muddy now for me.
All right. Today's show is also brought to you by Igloo, a digital workplace platform that enhances your corporate culture, improving how you work with your teams and the people inside of your organization. Igloo will help connect your team to three important things: the people inside of your company, the information that you need to share, and the processes that you have to go to. With Igloo, your people have access to what they need using the tools that they already know with a host of app integrations right inside of their Igloo. So you get to be able to share everything you do in your company. One of my favorite thoughts about this is when I used to work in a big company, everybody needed to sign a piece of paper to say that they understood some kind of safety procedure, and somebody had to physically walk it around the whole department and get people to sign it. With Igloo, you don't need that sort of stuff because people can just acknowledge that they've seen something. You can send out everything, you can make sure everybody's seen it, and then you're all set and ready to go. But you can also make sure that people are comfortable working within Igloo because they're using the devices that they love to use. They're not being forced to use a certain browser or a certain machine, and they're also able to integrate with the applications and services that they're using to get their other pieces of their work done. This is powerful stuff. Igloo can also be customized to represent your brand and culture. It helps define how your company operates. To enhance your processes and your culture inside of your organization, there are 4 things that you need to think about: communication, collaboration, knowledge management, and the workflow of your team. And this is what you can get started on with Igloo. That is what it's focused on: enhancing, building, and maybe even fixing. Igloo is a modern intranet designed to keep everyone on the same page. Try Igloo for free with no obligation to continue after your trial. Go to igloosoftware.com/connected now to find out more and sign up. We thank Igloo for their support of this show. So as we are still in the phase, I believe that Federico is still in the phase of his life in which he is devouring videos of sessions from WWDC.
No, not anymore. Surprisingly.
Oh, congratulations. You're out of it?
I have started writing the review.
Look at that. So, you're now at that stage, which means that you've watched every single second of every single session. I know that's what you've done. Every session has been consumed.
Well, 50.
Oh, I think it was all of them. I think you're being modest. Every single session. That's what I heard. He watched them twice and has done that since WWDC. So Ticci teaches today, which is the segment that I have given this a name for, and potentially maybe the last one, but at least I have a name for it now. Ticci teaches us today CoreML. What is CoreML, Federico?
So CoreML, it sounds like caramel, but it's not. It's not that. It's not caramel for AI. It's a different thing.
I didn't realize that. That's so amazing.
CoreML is, I'm afraid to disappoint you, Mike.
I can't hear it any other way now.
Yeah, I know, caramel. So CoreML, it's not the deep and open framework that you might expect. It's really more of a set.
If it's not deep and open, who cares?
Yeah, well, what do we need it for?
Well, I'm sorry. You can end the show. It's more of a set of developer tools for machine learning. It's not a framework to write, to develop actual machine learning stuff. So here's how it works. Machine learning is, at least the way that Apple is doing it, is based on models. And models are, think of them as files of code. It's actual code that you download from public sources, in this case for iOS. And there are a variety of models created with other tools, such as Keras or Caffe, or there's one called Scikit, I think. So you download these models, and they are code made by others to describe a series of objects or scenes or items stuff that you want machine learning to recognize and patterns that you want your software to understand. So the way that Apple has done it, they have this format. So CoreML is largely a format and a set of developer APIs that allows you to take in these already trained models, so this code that has already been taught how to recognize specific elements of everyday life. I'm simplifying here, but to understand. You take these models, Apple has a web page where they have some sample models that already work with CoreML, and you make them work with Apple's format. So the CoreML format is an actual file format. You convert these models into the iOS CoreML format, and you drop them into Xcode, and you drop them into your app, and you suddenly gain machine learning features from these already trained models. The way that Apple is doing it seems to me, I mean, I don't understand this stuff. I don't know. I mean, I've taken a look at machine learning code, and it's a bunch of mathematics that I really don't understand. But the way that it works is you set a goal. You're like, I want my photo app to recognize flowers and to recognize hotels and airports. I have these 3 different categories that I want my app to understand. So you find a model that is able to recognize those features in a photo. You take the model and you run it through the Python converter that Apple has put together, and that generates a compatible CoreML file. You drop it into Xcode, and your app can now identify flowers, airports, and hotels because of the CoreML tools. At a higher level, there's a bunch of machine learning APIs that Apple is offering in iOS 11, and CoreML itself is used by Apple in Siri for translation. It's using the camera for scene and object recognition, and it's also used, I believe, in the QuickType keyboard. So, you can, the next word predictions and all the suggestions that you get in the keyboard are powered by CoreML. Below CoreML on iOS 11, you find the more specific frameworks, such as the Vision API. So computer vision, it can recognize faces, scenes, objects, rectangles, whatever. And you have the NLP API, which is the natural language processing, which can do a bunch of things, like it can recognize sentences, it can recognize individual entities like verbs and pronouns and nouns. But these more specific APIs, they are an implementation of machine learning, and they depend on CoreML for them to work. So really what Apple has done here is, I saw someone say Apple has made the PDF of machine learning with CoreML, and I sort of understand the idea. I mean, it's not as easy as opening a PDF. Of course, you still need to write a bunch of code, and you still need to understand what you're doing. It's not like you're taking a CoreML file and you copy and paste into Xcode. Boom, machine learning. It's happening. It's not that easy.
Are you sure though? It sounds like it is that easy. That's what I'm
simple.
getting from where you're explaining it.
It is much easier for developers to find a model trained by someone else, publicly available, open source, and use it in an iOS app. And the fact that Apple is providing some models for free, some of them coming from Google, I believe, is a testament to the fact that they want to make it easy for you to get started. I'm interested to see how developers are going to take advantage of this. In the sense of, what are the possible implementations that we're going to see as users? What does this mean for us? And I think, stuff like photos and translations, the basics of recognizing things in a picture or understanding what a string of text means, that stuff, I think we're going to see plenty of it. I think we're going to get a bunch of enhancements for the apps that we already use. Starting this fall, we're going to get, for example, your calendar now can make better suggestions for the locations of events or the times of specific events. Or we're going to see apps that can automatically sort our photo libraries, in a way that maybe not even the Apple Photos app does. We're going to get, all these image recognition, summarizing text, doing translation. Maybe even the thing is, you can even combine these APIs together. So for example, you can recognize some text using NLP, using natural language processing. Then you take that recognized text, you pass it to CoreML, and you say things like, well, here's some text. I know that it's in English, and I know that it's got 2 verbs and the name of a person named Mike, and Mike says he's going to a concert. Can you analyze the sentiment of this text? And CoreML will, come back at you and say, well, it appears that Mike is happy, so maybe you want to show an happy face emoji. That kind of stuff. You can mix and match these APIs, and you can do most of this work using trained models that you can already find on the open web. You can take them, you can convert to the CoreML format, use them in Xcode, and let your app take advantage of those predictions, that analysis, all those features that Xcode and the iOS SDK wouldn't normally give you for free. And then you can combine it with this other stuff like NLP and vision. So I think there's a lot of potential here for, even these smaller features, like these smaller additions, like now Fantastical is smarter when it gives you recommendations for locations. Or now you can have a summary of your agenda based on the things that you want to know. And I think we're going to get these smaller, but yet so useful enhancements. And I'm really, really curious to see how this goes. So did that make any sense?
It does. It does. I am struggling to get my head around this one in ways that I haven't in the previous things that you've been talking about. And I've been that way since I first heard about CoreML, because I don't fully understand how this framework is able to do anything. If you give it like this just list of things, how does it know what's what? Like, it seems confusing to me.
So the basic idea is that it's all in the original code, the original model. So imagine there's a long file with millions of lines of code that has been trained with a type of neural network to understand what an apple looks like or what a bedroom looks like. And that is actual code. Like, there's a programmer wrote that and taught the network how to recognize those items in a picture. And you take that knowledge, you take that code, and you put it into an iOS compatible format, which is CoreML, and you start using it into your app. So CoreML, it's a two-way communication. Your app as a developer, Mike, you're putting together 1, 2, 3 AI. So you can pass text, or you can pass an image, or you can pass data, you can pass a dictionary. So you take some input from your app and you say, CoreML, help me figure out what is going on here. And the framework is gonna it'll do its processing. It's based on Metal, it's based on Accelerate. So these high performance frameworks that take a fraction of a second to understand scene recognition and that kind of stuff. And it comes back with a message that says, I believe there's a 90% accuracy that this picture is showing an apple or a horse or a mountain. And you take that and you say, well, I believe, as a user, here's your message. We believe this is a horse. But the essence of the actual machine learning is happening in the model. And that's what the most important part. But what Apple is doing here is it's making it easy for developers to take these models that have been going around for a couple of years now, maybe even more, and to use them on iOS. So it was also tricky for me to understand, because I was like, so where does the actual machine learning occur? And it's all in the model. What CoreML does is it's a Rosetta Stone for machine learning and apps. And it's helping them communicate and translate those inputs and commands from the machine learning code into data that can be used by an app on iOS. So it's this framework right in the middle between the algorithm and your app. That's what it is.
Let me see if I can say that back to you in a way that I think I've understood it with an example.
Yes.
So like Apple's photo recognition stuff, right? They had a bunch of data which was saying, this is what this picture is, this is what this picture is. This is what a horse is, this is what an apple is. But they need something in the middle to translate that information back to the photos.app. And CoreML is the thing that can it takes all of the information and can process it. So when the app asks a question, CoreML gives the answer because it has all of the information.
Yes.
Okay. So everything that goes through CoreML has to have some kind of huge data set that CoreML can read from, and
That's
it can
the
then
model.
it can interpret or extrapolate from it to give answers to questions that the application may have.
Basically, and we're oversimplifying here, but yes, that's what it does.
Yeah, we have to oversimplify because this is way over my pay grade.
Yes, we uses the model, which is the actual code, the programming that went into machine learning, and it communicates with iOS back and forth between the two, and it spits out a reasonable answer for your app to use.
What sorts of things do you see developers being able to do now that they have this, as opposed to in the past when this was more difficult or out of the reach of more people?
Well, translation services that used, in the past, like a web service or a web API, now they can do, if they have the right models and if they combine the NLP API and CoreML together, they can now do all of this stuff offline with local processing, and it takes a couple of seconds, maybe even less. So translation, doing things like summarizing text, or, of course, categorizing pictures based on scene or objects recognized in a picture. And then you can do things like, and this is all done locally. There's no web API. You don't have to be connected to the internet for this to work. You can do things like show me photos where I'm happy, or show me photos where another person was crying. And so you can do sentiment analysis.
God.
Yeah. And
don't make that such.
I mean, maybe to an extent, you could do things like, I want to help me find all of my diary entries where I was sad and I was typing in Italian. So if, I have diary, sometimes I write in Italian, other times I write in English, and I can find the sad entries of my diary in a specific language. Or maybe you could even do things like audio tagging, so you can process audio and recognize things in audio. Or you could do things like, understanding a specific speaker, for example, in an audio stream, like show me the bits where Mike is talking, all that kind of stuff.
Everyone needs that. All apps should use that feature, the when Mike is talking feature.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a wild west right now, really. Mm-hmm. It's all up to the developer's imagination, the models that they can find. And there's the criticism that is going on is that Apple is not making a real machine learning development tool. It's more of an API that takes in models from other proper tools and makes them compatible with iOS. It actually includes the models into the binary of an app. So at runtime, the model is already there, and it's not like a real program that you open on your computer and you're like, okay, I want to write machine learning code. That's not what it does. It's a way to take the model, take the code, and make it work with iOS.
Yeah, I understand that criticism, right? They're kind of cheating in a way, but they're also making something that sounds pretty impressive. But yeah, they are getting around doing that stuff themselves.
Like, it's not TensorFlow, It's not what Google is doing. It's a different approach.
Yeah. Thank you for teaching, Ticci.
Sure.
I feel educated. Thank you.
Is there anything else? Is there any other things that you want to do? Like, are there other things that you can talk about?
There are other things. I need to decide, so I don't want to pre-announce it this time, because it creates an expectation. But there are other things that I would like to discuss with you and sort of to wrap my head around, because it can be difficult to understand these ideas just by myself.
So there will be more.
I think if you run out of stuff, we can pivot, and I can teach you guys about Apple Talk nodes.
Sure.
If you want to find our show notes for this week, just go to relay.fm/connected/149. I'd like to thank our sponsors again for helping support this episode. So a huge thanks to Igloo, Hover, and Mac Weldon. If you want to find us online, there's a few places you can do that. You can go to 512pixels.net and at ISMH on Twitter for all of Steven's stuff, and at Viticci, VITICCI, and MacStories.net for all of Federico's. I am iMike, IMYKE on Twitter. Thank you so much for listening to this week's show, and we'll be back next time. Until then, say goodbye, guys.
Arrivederci.
Adios.